it may very well be the best looking German car ever made, and helped rewrite the racing rulebook forever. It's the Mercedes-Benz 300SL. After World War II, a U.S. importer for Mercedes, Max Hoffman, realized something as all the GIs are coming home from the European theater. They were all driving European sports cars. Two-door, convertible, or hardtop sports cars, like Triumphs and MGs. These were the hot thing. All of these young soldiers coming home from a war, they wanted freedom, they wanted fun, and the two-door sports car can deliver both of those things with ease. So, he tried to convince Mercedes to make a European sports car that he could sell in the US under the Mercedes badge. And initially they were rather skeptical. But then he just kind of said screw it anyway, and ordered 1,000 cars for US importation. One problem, they didn't have any cars. So, Mercedes decided to take their Le Mans winning 1952 W149 and modify it slightly. You see, they were already floating around the idea of turning the W194, a great name for a car by the way, into a road car. And this desire to have them in the US only solidified that decision. So, the next step was an engine. They had the body and the chassis, they needed an engine. The largest engine Mercedes has was the M198. 3 liters straight 6. Well, that wasn't gonna be enough, so they added an aluminum head instead of steel to save weight, dry sump lubrication, and, you're gonna love this, the direct fuel injection system based off a BF-109 fighter plane. Yeah! That was good for 212 horsepower. In 1952, that's pretty damn good. And just 2 years later, in 1954, Mercedes debuted the 300SL Coupe at the International Motor Show in New York City. Yes, they actually introduced the car in America because that was the target market. Sorry, Germany, France, and Britain, you all can get the scraps. This thing looked amazing. It had a super streamlined Le Mans style body. And most critically of all, gull-wing doors. Yes! That is one of the best looking cars of all time. And thanks to that super streamlined body, it could reach 163 miles an hour, making it the fastest production car in the world at the time. But speed is only half the equation of a good sports car. You gotta make it go around corners. So, they fitted with massive drum brakes to slow it down, and a tubular frame that saved quite amount of weight. And that meant, combine that with the soft suspension that was good for comfort, critics loved it. It had the handling thanks to the lightweight and the chassis from racing, but it had the comfortness of the soft suspension and the luxurious interior. It was the best of both worlds, and even better, in today's money, it only cost 63 grand. That's not bad for the fastest production car in the world. Can you imagine the Koenigsegg costing 63 grand? Neither can I. And that price is also really good these days because, they typically go at auction for, at least $1 million. Yeah. Now, despite the massive power and handling and incredible beauty of the coupe, or coupe, how you want to pronounce it, sales were starting to slump a bit. So they cut the roof off and called it the Roadster. The Roadster went on sale in 1957 and it needed more weight to improve the structural rigidity, so they compensated by bumping the power up to 240 horsepower. So it was, again, just as quick, if not faster, than the coupe in a straight line. It was a quick car. Unfortunately, by 1958, sales had already peaked with 850 cars sold, and by 1963, just 94 rolled off of dealer lots. And it's kind of easy to see why. It had very low luggage space because of the super sleek body, and since it had a fuel injection system from a fighter plane, the mechanics needed special training, so it was very difficult to get service. Yeah. And as a result, it was discontinued in 1963. Now, remember, this was based primarily off of a racing car that won the 1952 24 Hours of Le Mans outright. So you would expect it to be pretty darn successful, and it was. It won the famed Panamericana Rally. It also won the 1955 European Rally Championship. It won sports car racing, and as recently as 2016, a heavily modified version set an FGT class speed record at the Bonneville Salt Flats with a verified top speed of 191 miles an hour. Yeah, but as great as these are, the most famous run of it all was way back in 1955 at the Mills Maglia. 534 cars started the 1,600-kilometer road rally across Italy. And we had Aston Martin, Maserati, Ferrari, all competing for the top honors. And Mercedes, well, they didn't want to come in, rookies here, obviously. They didn't want to come in empty-handed, so they brought along two top drivers, a.k.a. Stirling Moss and Juan Manuel Fangio. Ever heard of him? He's a 5-time F1 world champion. But in terms of aces up some sleeves, Moss certainly had them. You see, he had a co-driver. His name was Dennis Jenkinson. And Jenkinson had spent months before the rally preparing a sort of guidebook that foretold each corner to the driver before he saw it. So he would write down what the corner was, 90-degree left, straight right, whatever, and then he would tell it to his driver, aka Moss, during the race while it's in progress, so he can know what the corner was and adjust accordingly. This meant Moss was reportedly so confident in his co-driver and their notes that he could go over blind crests at 170 miles an hour in 1955 on closed public roads. That man is a maniac. And this bonsai charge through Italy meant that Moss beat his teammate Fangio, who secured second place, by 35 minutes, setting an all-time record of 10 hours, 7 minutes, and 48 seconds, which stands to this day. The guidebook that Jenkinson wrote revolutionized the sport of rallying forever and evolved into the pace notes that modern WRC drivers utilize to this day and ever since. It is a critical and vital tool to world rallying, and it was all started in 1955 with Jenkinson and the Mercedes 300 SLR. Now, after the 300 SL, the SL badge shifted from sports cars to touring cars, and they were very good touring cars, make no mistake, but they weren't really the racing cars for road use that the 300 was. They did make an SLR McLaren in 2003, and Mercedes calls it a true successor to the 300. I mean, it even had a Stirling Moss edition, but it wasn't really a true successor in many fans' eyes. They would have to wait until 2009 with the SLS AMG. This 571 horsepower, naturally aspirated V8 powered sports car was just like the 300. It had sleek style that's modern yet classic at the same time. It looks good. It also handled it quite well because Mercedes AMG. Oh, and most crucially of all, gullwing doors. Yes, they made a return briefly. Because as great as the SLS AMG and its millions of versions was, it was replaced in 2015 by the cheaper and less powerful AMG GT, which did not have gullwing doors, which is cool, I guess, if you're boring. The 300SL is one of those vehicles that you don't really remember it, but when you see it, you instantly know what it is. It's absolutely a timeless piece of automotive design, not just in terms of the gorgeous styling and iconic doors, but the handling, the performance, the top speed, the racing impact that has lasted throughout history. This is an important car, and I would argue the most important car in the history of Mercedes-Benz. And that's a pretty bold statement.